Now we have seen several factors about this simple phone book Ruby script. It's time to get into the basics. So the first thing that we are going to look into in here is the array and then how to use the collections of hashes. So basically both of this array, the concept of array and hashes are included in the fundamentals of collection. They do differ in certain ways. I mean, they do have their fundamental differences, but both of them can be used to manipulate objects. So, in order to manipulate objects, we need to store them. So, before we move on to the actual program building, we need to understand how arrays work. So we have seen how variables work. We have already created a variable called my name and we have assigned a certain value, a string value to this my name variable. But this variable is only a single container, which means it can store only a single value, and this single value is the only name. But what happens when we have got several names? Suppose we have got several names of several people. Maybe we have got names of 10 employees in an organization. What happens if we need to create an ordered list? Ordered means that we suppose we have to assign. If we look at the genealogical tree of a family, we can see that the grandfather comes first, the father comes next, and the last person who will be included in the tree will be the son. So we have got the grandfather, who's the first person, then the father who comes after grandfather, and the son who comes after the father. So there's a sequence. So we can assign a certain number to this sequence. We can say that the grandfather has been assigned the number one because he comes first in the family tree. Then we can assign the number 2 to the father because he comes second in the family tree. Then we have the son who comes in the third position, and we can assign number 3 to the son. So we find that there's a sequence. We can't say that the son comes in between the grandfather and the father. That's absurd. We can't even say that the son comes before the grandfather. So that's also something that's absolutely unnatural. So we have to understand that there is a sequence. When we need to store data inside our memory or inside the RAM in a sequence, we need to use the array capability. But if we have to move towards an unordered collection, then we have to go for hashes. But before we look into hashes, let's look into what arrays are. So let's erase this off. So as I've said earlier, arrays are an ordered collections or an ordered collection of elements. I mean, or an ordered collection. If we put it in Ruby's perspective, it's a collection of objects. So inside array, every element or every data that we store inside the list, we have to store it or we have to place an index to that corresponding element. So it might sound a little confusing at the first instance. So let's break it down and try to try to analyze or try to look into an analogous situation that happens in a real life world. So suppose we have to go for shopping, or we have to go for grocery shopping, if you'd like to say that, or we could even go for cooking. Now cooking has certain steps. Cooking has a sequence. So if you have to go for shopping, you create a list. Your list is ordered in, like, you want to buy some sort of I'm not a cook, so I'm not really expert in this field. So I can just assume, um, suppose you want to buy spices. Let's say you want to buy spices. So your first thing is that maybe you want to make an omelet. So what you need to do is put the oil on the pan. Then you need to you need to break the egg. You need to put salt on the egg. Then obviously, if you want to put some spices on it, if you like spices, or if you want to put some, um, I don't know, maybe you know, there are certain spices that people love to put in omelets in the Indian subcontinent. So this might actually vary from culture to culture, but uh, we will not worry about what's happening inside it. We are worried about the sequence. So when we have to go for cooking, we need to put the oil on the pan because the oil needs to boil first. Then we put the egg. That's sequence number two. So the first sequence, or the first thing that we need to do, is put the oil, which is sequence number one. We can say that that's the first element that we put inside the pan. Then the second thing is the egg. So the pan is like a container. It's like a box. If you look at a box can have a several stuff. But if you look at a library shelf, an organized library shelf, you'll find that all those shelves have a certain index. The first shelf will have an index of 1, the second one, or after the first shelf, the second shelf will have an index of 2. So there are sequences in an organized library, but that's not the case in all libraries. We know that. So the fact is that if we need a collection of objects, we need to use either array or hash. So the point that I'm trying to make in here, if we want to place an ordered list, if we want to maintain the sequence among the data that we need to put inside that container, then we need to use the array. So how do we do that? Let's say we haven't got an array. Now, declaring an array is very simple. All we need to do is just like it's more of like the previous example that we have seen earlier with the variable. You just need to say that you need to assign a name, or you need to include an identifier or a name for your array. We can say that shopping list.